The night was thick with tension as Wine clutched the stolen flash drive in her palm, her breath ragged. Hidden in the shadows of an abandoned alley, she glanced back at the high-security estate she had just infiltrated. Her father had sent her to retrieve a list of undercover spies planted within their own ranks, information that in the wrong hands could destroy everything. With her heart hammering, she sprinted toward her escape route, keeping low, her footsteps light against the pavement. Just a little more and she would be out of this hellhole. Finally, she entered a drenched alley, where rain was kissing the ground like bullets from heaven, fast, relentless, and cold. Then, like an omen of doom, a loud honk shattered the silence. Wine froze, her eye twitched. No way. She turned her head ever so slightly and found herself bathed in the obnoxiously bright headlight of a black sports car rolling at a slow, taunting pace beside her. Another honk. Running away from me, princess, his infuriatingly smug voice boomed through the roll-down window. That voice belonged to only one man in Seoul with that level of sexy arrogance, power and mischief. The Jeon Jungkook. Twisted, dangerous, filthy rich and just a little too obsessed with him. Not very subtle, are we? Vine gritted her teeth and bolted. I swear to God, Jim, I will shove that car up your... Stole something again, didn't you, you little thief? Chuckled like the devil was amused. She turned and threw a rock at his windshield, which, of course, he dodged with a laugh. Real mature, sweetheart. You steal top secret info and think you can just jog home? You, I will end you, she snapped, pushing her legs harder. Hey, you are barely ending this job. Out of breath already? Before she could scream more obscenities, she heard something worse than his voice. Angry shout. The enemy group had spotted her. Bullets tore through the night, one grazing her waist from the side, sending white-hot pain shooting up her rib. She stumbled, biting back a scream, as warmth seeped through her suit. Jungkook's car screeched to a halt. His taunting voice turned ice cold. Oh, hell no. The moment she hit the ground, she heard his door slam open, followed by the deafening blast of run. Jungkook's amusement turned into violence in a blink. He was out of the car, gun drawn, within seconds. He moved like a stone, a deadly force tearing through their enemies with precision and fury. His black trench coat hid behind him like wings of death. Wine blinked through the pain, watching as he disarmed one man with a swift twist, shot another man blank, and sent a third one flying with a brutal kick. By the time the dust settled, the enemies were either dead or groaning in agony on the ground. The alley smelled of. Jungkook stalked towards her, jaw clenched, eyes glazed. You okay? Breathless and pissed, groaned. You had one job. Stay the hell away. Oh, so I should have let them kill you. My bad. He mocked, crunching beside her. His expressions turned darker than the storm clouds overhead, as his hands hovered over her gown before he simply ripped part of his shirt and pressed it to the ground. You just had to do things your way, huh? Vine whimpered, clutching her side. You are the last face I want to see tonight. That's too bad, babe. Jungkook smiled, skillfully tying the makeshift bandage around her waist, his hands all over her, as she was practically in his embrace. I'm the last face you'll ever see if you keep playing stupid. She was thinking, damn it, Jeon. Stop playing, he muttered, tightening the bandage. I didn't just save your life for you to bleed out on me. Vine called, but her body betrayed her. Leaning slightly into him, his hands were firm, steady, protected. She hated how good that felt. Can you walk? He asked softly. I can crawl away from you, she shot back, smirked. Yeah, no, not happening. Without warning, he scooped her up, carrying her bridal style toward his car. What the hell? She shrieked, struggling. Put me down, you overgrown parasite. He chuckled. Babe, if I put you down, you're gonna just fall and embarrass both of us. She frowned, but the pain in her side forced her to go still. The warmth of his body seeped into her, the adrenaline slowly fading. As much as she hated to admit it, it was the worst place to be. Inside the safe house, she blinked awake to the bright light and expensive leather. She was inside a soft blanket, yet Jungkook's jacket was draped over her. His tattooed hand held a soaked cloth to her forehead, while his other hand casually scrolled through a flash drive on a silver laptop. You are nosy, she whispered weakly, smug without looking. You bled all over my seats. I deserve answers. Sat up with a grunt. You were following me. Snapped the laptop shut and completely shifted his attention to hers. Always am. Just waiting for you to finally crawl back, preferably, and apologizing.
Thank